Hello and welcome to the fifth video in the MB Sports Web video training series covering the Game Officials module. In this video we're going to start assigning games. Now in the previous two videos we looked at how to set up the officials themselves, and part of that process was defining their qualifications and experience. And in the last video we also looked at how to set up the default settings for each of those teams. The more time you spend on getting the system set up the way you want, the easier that the assigning process becomes. So back in our demo site, we're looking at the Game Officials module and on the Day at a Glance page. Now there are a number of different ways of looking at games in the Game Officials module, and we'll cover those as we go along here. But we're going to start on the Day at a Glance page as one of the most commonly used pages when assigning officials. This page allows us to jump to any day that we're looking for in the calendar by using the Jump To drop down, or we can use these arrows to navigate 1 day, 3 days, or 7 days ahead or back. This page allows us to view all of the assignable games in the site, or if we want to see every game, even the ones which wouldn't typically need officials, you can choose the All Games option. There's filters to show certain sets of teams, to filter by position, to filter by venue, and at each filter that you apply, once you've applied them, click the Update button to see the additional information that you've chosen. So we'll go back to the assignable games, and the other things that we'll point out is that this page can be printed, exported to CSV, or to iCal. So in our list of games, we use color coding quite a bit to help highlight things that might be of concern or things that you need to look at. Each of these games in the list is showing that there are no officials assigned, and that message shows with a yellow background and a red text. As we go through the various lists of games, we'll see other colors that get applied. But to assign officials to this first game in this list, we double click on the game that's in the list, and that will show the Assign Officials form. Now this form has an incredible amount of information on it that will help to find the officials that you would like to use, to verify that you have the right numbers of officials, to set the pay rates for each of the officials, both for their pay and for their mileage. All that's done on this one form. So once we selected a game from the list, it will open up and pre-select the date and the venue where that game was located. It will then show a list of games that are also on that same venue for that same day, and if we want to assign crews of officials, we can just check off more than one game in the list. Each of these games that is listed, it's also showing us the default settings that we set up previously for these teams or for this division. And when they're showing in red, that means that none of these positions have been assigned for this game yet. As we start to assign officials, these colors will change to orange once they become partially assigned, and green once they are fully assigned. There's little question marks that appear next to those defaults, which will also have a little tooltip that shows the default pay, the minimum qualification level for this team, and the minimum experience level for the team. We can also click on the name of the team to view a history of that team for the season. This would show any officials who are assigned to any of the games, what their partners were, and it also shows the score of those games, so you can try to see if there is a bias for any of those officials that have been assigned to those games. So we close that. We have the type of the game, so regular season, exhibition, playoff, those will be abbreviated. The period lengths for hockey, or inning lengths, if the scheduler had entered those, and if they're different than the default, then they would be bolded. And just like on the regular page, or the list of games page, the games that have no officials assigned use the same color coding. So on the right hand side, it now has our list of officials that are available by position. So looking at the games themselves, it's asking us for two-man referees. So we'll use that as the position that we want to look at. Also, based on the teams that have been selected for any of the games, it will look at the minimum qualification level for any of those teams and predefine our qualification as greater than or equal to that minimum qualification. If the experience was also separate in any of those teams, then that would also be pre-selected and would give us a list of all the officials who are available. These officials are both qualified and have not been booked for other games on that day for that time. They also do not have team blocks for any of the teams that are selected, or venue blocks for the venue that these games are located at. So in theory, these officials should be available for this game. So the three that are showing in the list, it shows their name. If you've added the birthdays, it will show their age, their certification level, and their experience for the position that is selected. It will show the date of their previous assignment and the date of their next assignment, and if you hover over it, it will tell you exactly what that next assignment is. If their previous assignment or next assignment happened to be on the same day as what we're looking at, then this would change to a time instead and would show in red. Now, in addition, there's 4 numbers that show up. So these are the total number of previous assignments relative to the date that we're looking at, the total number of upcoming assignments relative to this date, the total number of previous assignments for any of these teams that we've got selected, and the total number of upcoming assignments for any of these teams that we have selected. So if you have the ability to ensure that officials are not scheduled for the same teams over and over again, then these numbers will help to enforce that policy. For any of these numbers, you can also click on them, and that would then give you the full history or the full upcoming list of games that these officials have been assigned to, who their partners are, what their pay rates would be, and their confirmed or unconfirmed or denial status. Again, we'll go over the color coding a little bit later on. We can also sort these officials by qualification, either low to high or high to low, by age, if the birth dates have been set, by the date of their previous assignment. So if you're looking to ensure that officials who have not worked in a while have priority over those who have worked more recently, then you would choose the date of their previous assignment to sort by, and then the ones who are due for an assignment would show up first in the list. The date of their next assignment would do the same thing, but for the next assignment date. And you can also sort by their full name. So once we've got people that we would like to add, we can click this Assign button, and that will assign the official to any of the games that we have checked off. Now this has updated the default requirements information to show in orange now to indicate that one referee has been assigned, and we're still asking for another one. So we'll go ahead and add a second official. This will change the color of the default information to green to indicate that we've got the right number. And now we're just looking to add a timekeeper. So we'll go ahead and add a timekeeper as well. As we're assigning the officials to the games, it is picking up the default pay rate for this position for that team. And if we now need to adjust that, we can go ahead and do that. In addition, if the official that was being assigned to the game had a default mileage rate, then that number would be populated into the gas column. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are paying mileage and you're assigning a crew of officials to a game, that their mileage rates would come across to all of the games they get assigned to. In reality, it's more than likely that they're not going to get paid mileages for the additional games. They only would get paid mileage for the first game. So you can make those adjustments as necessary. Once we have our officials set up, it's telling us that there's 9 changes that are pending. And what will happen when I click the update is that any of these officials that have been assigned will get email notification of their games, at which point they'll be asked to return back to the website to either confirm if you've enabled the option to confirm, or deny as long as you've enabled the number of days in between the current date and the day of the game, so that they can deny the game. So the color coding that shows up on the pages, as we look at other ways to look at games, within our standard games list, we can look at all the games for any date range that we wish to look at. So we'll expand this to show into the end of October to look at every single game. Even the ones that have officials who are assigned and all confirmed would show up in this list. We also can look at games with denials. So if an official is notified of their game assignment, returns to the website, has the ability to deny the game, and does deny the game, an email will be sent to the assigners letting them know that an official has denied an assignment. You can then return back to the standard games list, view the games with denials, and anybody that's showing up with red background and white text will be somebody who has denied that assignment. At this point, you can then re-edit the game and look for those red denied officials and choose to unassign them. Now, one thing that you might want to do when you unassign the officials is to create a time block when you unassign them. This way, when we unassign the official, it will create a block in the system for the time of these games that were removed, so that if the next person who gets assigned also denies and you need to go back in and find somebody else again, the first person will not be available due to that time block being there. So at this point, we would probably want to assign somebody else. So we'll go ahead and assign this person, and now we have a new official assigned. If we click update, it will go ahead and take out the denials, and we'll set everybody else to unconfirmed again. We can also look at a list of unassigned games. So this would look at any game where no officials have been assigned to it at all. And this would be essentially a to-do list of games to start assigning officials to. This date range can be set to be a few weeks, a few months, however far into the future you'd like it to go. The Games with Issues page actually looks at the default settings that are applied for each of the teams in the system, and then we'll look at the number of officials that have been assigned. And if those defaults have not been applied, then it will show on this Games with Issues page. So for example, we're looking at these two games, and the reason it's on the Games with Issues page is because we have one two-man referee assigned for each of these games, and it should be two. So if we check off both games and assign another official, then we will have green showing in those the default information areas. Update, and our Games with Issues page is now empty as well. The unconfirmed games page will show anybody who has been assigned to a game and has not yet responded. Now, this will show officials who were assigned seconds ago. So what we also have available is an unconfirmed after X number of days. And earlier on, we talked about how this unconfirmed after X number of days is configurable. This site happens to have 14, which is a very long time to have waited. Typically, you're going to want to set this to 2 or 3 days at the most. But that would mean that anybody who has been assigned more than 2 days ago would show up on this unconfirmed games list after X number of days, at which point we would probably make the decision to remove those officials who have not confirmed and assign a different official to the game. The last games list that's in this list of standard games is this games with no shows. So after a game has happened, we can edit an individual assignment, and if this game was in the past, we could check off this box to indicate that they were a no-show. Now, because this assignment is in the future, we have a different option to actually confirm it. So if the official has a reason that they cannot confirm the game themselves, we as an assigner can confirm that assignment for them. So once we've done that, then the colors change again so that there's no background color and the text is green. And that is intentionally done to try to make that assignment fade into the background and not be noticeable. The other list of games that might be useful is this list of games by team. So the reason you might want to do this is if you have a high profile team where you want to focus on scheduling games for that team because they need to have the most experienced, highest level of certification referees available, then you can start by, instead of looking at the games by day, you start by looking at games by team. For each of the games for that team which you need the most experienced referees, you would then go through, and if there happen to be other games near the date and time of the games for our special team, then we could assign crews of officials. But our focus is going to be to make sure that we've got the best officials assigned to this particular team first. Then once we've assigned those, we would go back to the data glance or to those other pages to fill in the holes for the rest of the officials. So now that we've got some officials assigned to a bunch of games in this site, we'll quickly talk about what happens if the schedule for these games changes. Now, I'll start by looking at this availability by date page, and we'll go over this in a future video, but this essentially shows us for any given day what's happening for all the officials or specific officials that we're looking at. And I'm going to focus on my own setting here, in indicating that I have a block set from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then games that are scheduled that I've been assigned to that are happening from 1 to 2 o'clock. And this is happening on the 27th. So if I happen to have access to the scheduling module, then I would be able to go in here and do it. Typically, the scheduler would be a different person, but I happen to have access to both. So I'm going to go and look at those novice games and the ones on the 27th in particular. So this 1 o'clock game I know that I was assigned to, and I also know that I have a blockout earlier in the day. So I'm going to go ahead and move this game to 11 o'clock. Update that. So I, as a scheduler, have now updated a game. Now while I'm in here, I'm going to go ahead and cancel that second one so we can see what happens when those games are adjusted by the scheduler. So now we have that second game canceled and the first game's moved. So let's go back to the game officials module and see what's happened. If we look at data glance for the 27th, we'll see that for the second game, because it's marked as canceled, it doesn't even show on the assignable games list. If I click all games and update, we now have this game that was canceled and there are no officials assigned. So what that means is that any game that is canceled will automatically release all the officials that are assigned to that game. An email will be sent when this happens, so the assigners will know exactly who had been previously assigned to the game, and all of the officials who are assigned to the game will also be notified automatically that the game has now been canceled, and the reason for the cancellation will be included in their notification. This will free up those officials to be assigned to other games on that same day if that's a possibility where other games are still happening and they need to find officials. Now that first game, the one that we moved from 1 o'clock to 11 o'clock, we did have 3 officials assigned and now we only have 2. So what the system did when that game was moved is it looked at the schedules, including the blockouts, for every official that was assigned to the game, and then examined the new time to see if it created a conflict. And for my own setting in here as a referee, obviously I did have a blockout time from 10 to 12, and therefore with this game moving into the 11 o'clock hour, it automatically unassigned me because it created a conflict. Again, it will trigger notification when that happens to let people know what's going on. And in addition, we are now logging those onto the assignment auditing page, which would also show. So the unassigned via cancels are showing with a cancellation message, and this game here where it was updated and therefore was the unassigned happened and the date and time was changed and it created a conflict. So these things are all being logged. So that is one of the nicest things about this site is that the scheduler is able to maintain the schedule of the games and do their work to ensure that the games are being played or not being played when those decisions need to happen, and not having to worry about notifying the officials who are assigned to it or notifying the assigners. The site takes care of all that for you automatically.